plan to put slides up. But Landis, that was great, and I think that kind of sets the stage for a bit of what I was going to talk about as well. And there's another harvester who passed away this year, Ricky Santerre in Cherryfield. So Ricky had been there on that site for many, many years. I think his son's going to take over the harvest at that spot. So that's Alewife River. And there's a dam there that was built by the Corps of Engineers in '61. And it was built for dam safety, actually, to protect the town, was the justification from ice that was coming downstream. So there'd been mill dams there over many, many decades, centuries probably. And when one of the dams went out, there was the feeling that when that dam washed out, it was no longer in use, that ice then began to come down through town, and it was a problem for the Route 1 bridge and some buildings and so on. So the Corps of Engineers was convinced to come in and build a dam there. And essentially what they did, as far as we can figure out, they took the elevation of the dam that had been there for many, many years, and they just used that. And they said, well, if we didn't have ice problems before that, and this was the elevation, we'll just build another dam this size. So it's a roll dam, and it's got some other components that were put in place with the concept that it would prevent ice from building up, going down through town and blocking the river, flooding the town out. And there was a big debate in '61 over whether it would have fish passage or not. And there was a big fight over that. Ultimately, they did put fish passage in, and it's not ideal. It's caused some issues. The sea-run brook trout, which had been a really important fishery there, essentially came to an end, and a lot of people believe because of the way the dam was built and the fishway was constructed, that it eliminated that run. But it's also an issue for other fish like shad and Atlantic salmon. Of course, everybody probably is aware Alewife was a very well-known salmon river. So we've got a situation where there's a dam that's outlived its purpose, or maybe not its purpose, but its design life. So it's falling apart, and it's either going to be rebuilt as is, or there's going to be some modifications for it in terms of its use as an ice control dam. But in the process, what's going to happen is the fishway it needs to be looked at as well, because there's issues for, like I said, shad and salmon, sea-run brook trout, and so on. However, and this is playing out in other places as well, it's the site of the harvest for alewives. So the town has harvested alewives at the top of the fishway, just like in East Machias, where Bucket Davis is from. So it's a convenient place to catch alewives because you've got them consolidated there and they're coming up through, but they're mixed with other fish. So on the East Machias at Gardner Lake, where there's a alewife harvest, we don't seem to be seeing shad there. And however, on the Alewife, there's shad. So over time, what's been done in order to kind of enumerate how many shad are there and to prevent them from going up into the alewife harvest, the bars on the salmon trap. So you've got a fishway, fish come up, the salmon get excluded from the fish trap. They've got their own trap, so they're being monitored for how many salmon are coming back, and they can be sent off to the side after they've been counted, measured, sampled, and so on. And eventually, the state decided to put in exclusion bars for shad to keep the shad from going into the alewife trap. And most of them are excluded, but shad and alewives kind of overlap in their size. So occasionally you've got shad getting impinged in the bars. So they're just big enough that they can go through and get stuck. And they also don't like being stuck in a trap very long, and the trap configuration, they've been seeing a lot of shad dying in the trap. This is the salmon trap that's been modified as a shad trap, and the alewives can swim through it and get into the alewife trap. So you get basically kind of three traps, three different sized fish. One of these fish happens to be endangered, the Atlantic salmon, So now if you're gonna redesign this site, just like we're talking about other sites where you have endangered animal at the same place you've got a commercial animal, you're trying to not do harm to the Atlantic salmon. So what all that means is, because this Cherryfield site's going to be rebuilt one way or the other, there's talk about putting a rock ramp in there, something that would allow the fish to swim right up and over. How are you going to catch your alewives if you don't have a fishway there with all these series of traps in it? So thankfully, NOAA Fisheries has been a part of this conversation, and Matt Bernier is here. Matt, raise your hand. Everybody probably knows Matt, but the Down East Salmon Federation, which is a nonprofit conservation group, and we do research and restoration, dam removals and fishways and all of that. We've got a cooperative agreement with NOAA to apply some money to answer this question. How are you going to catch your alewives, prevent the shad from getting in there, maybe exclude brook trout as well, and endangered salmon all in one spot, or maybe in a series of places in a different way than what's been done currently, because what's there now in Cherryfield is going away eventually. So that's the design puzzle. And with some of the NOAA support financially, we're going to put out a request for proposals to engineering firms to come in and help us solve this puzzle. So the application of this is important because it goes beyond just Cherryfield. When we look at Gardner Lake outlet, we've got a similar situation there. There's actually 2 outlets, so it's like Landis was saying, every site's a little different. They're complicated by where the water's going, where the fish want to go, where people harvest, and all of those things. Who owns the structures, and who controls the water, and all those types of things. So the implications from Cherryfield will have bearing on other places where there are Atlantic salmon in the presence of a commercial harvest. So if anybody has thoughts on how to go about catching alewives without harming salmon or harming shad, this is the time to speak up, because there is going to be some engineering charrette, I guess you say, to try to figure this out. You're not going to put the gap to me yet. I got a few more stories.
No,
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just standing up, being cheerful.
Okay,
I'm here
good.
for support.
Yeah, thanks. I needed emotional support.
Yeah, I have a quick question on the
Yeah.
on the excluder thing. Has anyone ever tried any, like, instead of just vertical, horizontal things? It seems shad are a little bit taller.
Right.
Is that I know it'd be more.
We'll put that on
yet.
the list.
Yeah.
No, I haven't heard or know of anything like that, but I think that's what we're looking at. Or, a lot of different ideas have come up. So if you think about where else do we have Atlantic salmon, Tunk in Steuben is another harvest site. So that's one. Potentially the Pleasant River in Columbia Falls in the future has been harvested there in the past as well. So time will tell, I guess, what we come up with for a good solution.
Can I ask the question why they're worried about shad? Seems that's part of their habit, would be their habitat. Why are they trying to exclude shad?
Well, sorry. What we're doing is excluding them from the alewife harvest. So if you're going to take half a ton of alewives out, and you've got 50 shad in there, you're going to have to sort them out because you don't have a license to harvest shad. So
They get gilled in the thing.
they could get so they get gilled in those bars that are supposed to bounce them off and push them somewhere else. So they're not excluding them from the river; they're excluding them from the harvest. And if you think of the Union River, if you're familiar with the Union River situation, there's a big trap that sits there. They send water down through it to attract the alewives up in there, and it would attract a salmon, it would attract a shad, or other fish. Lamprey are another one, of course. There's a lot of lamprey in some sites, So if you're not licensed to harvest lamprey, then, and they're all mixed in with your alewives, how are you gonna sort them out? So there could be other places as well on the Kennebec or the Penobscot where there's multiple species in one spot. Sometimes we're lucky and all you've got is just pure alewives, and that makes life easy, but it's not always like that. So that's the story with that. We've got, like I say, we're putting together a request for proposals that would go out to firms. Matt, you've been involved with the conversation. I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've said.
No, I think that's fine.
Yeah, good. And just by way of other projects that are going on that Downey Salmon Federation is involved with, there's been projects in the upper Machias. There isn't currently an alewife harvest on the Machias River. There could be, if enough data could be assembled. There's a lot of alewives in the Machias River. Nobody's really harvesting them. Dip-netting a few, but the upper Machias and back in the day when those dams were taken out, they weren't worried about cleaning up and anything else. And I remember this, they just went in and blew the dams out and walked away. There was metal everywhere and everything else. That was it. And a lot of the dams got taken out that way. But there's still a few up in the upper Machias that have no fish passage at all. These are all log driving dams, and Sabio Lake is one, Chain Lake is another. So we've been working with the lake associations and then with agency support to bring a design together to put fish passage into those sites. Medibemps Lake, we've been working on improving that. It's on the Denny's where there could be a future harvest. There's a lot of data being pulled together there with cameras and counting. Penamaquan in Pembroke, we're probably within a year of being able to start a harvest over there. I say we, but DSF is just helping, and there's a lot of other partners involved. But there's been a new fishway built on the Penamaquan, which is really improving the ability for the fish to get up through easily. There's one story on the Orange River, which is in Whiting, in Cobscook Bay, and that was a situation very much like what Landis was describing at China Lake. There's 3 dams, no fish passage. The lowermost dam, privately owned, 80 years, no fishway. Historically, there were fishways and very big success stories of doing exactly what we're talking about today. 100+ years ago, people were doing the same thing, saying, can we do it? Can we build a fishway that works? Can we stock them and then have them come back? And they did it, and they proved it over and over, and they harvested. Well, the fishway burned, the dam burned, the mill burned, fishway collapsed. So DSF ended up buying this dam. And it's 200 years old, it's 20 feet tall and 200 feet wide. It's the lowermost dam, no fish passage. And when we started working with the people, the complicated part, people said, well, we don't want a muddy trickle and we don't want an alder swamp and we want the pond the way it is. This is the town government and some others. So the success here was we're going to build a fishway, technical fishway so-called, around this thing. But first we've got to rebuild the dam, because the dam, from a safety standpoint, was about to go. And it might go tomorrow, we don't know. In the meantime, between now and when it gets rebuilt, but Susan Collins came to the rescue of the town in this case with a $3 million earmark appropriation to rebuild the dam. So and put a fishway in it. So DSF owns the dam, and we've struck a deal with the town to say, well, if you can find the money to rebuild the dam, this will give you the dam. But there'll be a provision that says you're going to have an appropriate fishway. So Susan Collins did pull this out of her hat, and there you have it. So there'll be a $3 million investment in a dam there for a 6-acre head pond, and that will trigger then the 2 dams upriver that IF&W owns to get fishways. So it'll be another I don't know how many millions of dollars on fishways built at those dams. So in the next coming years, we're probably looking at $7 or $8 million being spent on that river system to build a brand new dam, put a brand new fishway in it, and then put fishways up above, stock the alewives, or allow there are some still feeding themselves against the lower dam. So that was an unusual outcome. So a few years ago, there were no earmarks allowed. So that tool's come back into the toolbox. So for anybody that wants a project to get done, you can go and ask your senators and so on to go look for that money. Mike Manning, who works for Down East Salmon Federation, is home with COVID right now. Otherwise, he'd be here. And he's been helping, like at the Fisherman's Forum, Alewife harvesters, put up the table and display and so on. And he'll be helping with the social media and some other aspects of this. He's also the point person for us and for Alewife harvesters with a number of these river systems, putting in counters like on the Pennamaquan, helping up by Medibens with the harvester there, future harvester, Orange River, and all these various sites. Patent Stream's another one that we've been working with Maine Center for Coastal Fisheries on as well, to assist the town there in doing the monitoring. Anything else, Jeff?
Well, there's always plenty, but I think we're gonna put Mike Tallhouse on the hot seat. What do you think?
I think that's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea.
Alright, goals here for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be a problem.